Chapter 1. Early Life and Family Background. Cleopatra VII Philopator was born in 69 BC in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. She was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a royal family that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great's general, Ptolemy I, took control of the country. Even though the Ptolemies ruled Egypt, they were Greek, not Egyptian. They spoke Greek, followed Greek traditions, and saw themselves as Greek rulers in a foreign land. Unlike many of her ancestors, Cleopatra was different. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language. Most of her family only spoke Greek, but Cleopatra wanted to connect with the Egyptian people. She also spoke Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, and several other languages, making her one of the most multilingual rulers in history. Cleopatra was very intelligent and well-educated. She studied at the Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. There, she learned mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, science, and medicine. She also studied public speaking and politics, which helped her later as a ruler. Many historians believe that Cleopatra's intelligence was her greatest strength, not just her beauty. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, was the ruler of Egypt before her. He was unpopular because he was seen as a weak leader who depended too much on Rome to keep his throne. To keep Rome's support, he borrowed a lot of money from Roman politicians, putting Egypt into debt. This made many Egyptians angry, and he was forced into exile. While her father was away, Cleopatra's older sister, Berenice IV, took the throne. But when Ptolemy XII returned with Roman support, he executed Berenice and became king again. This event taught Cleopatra that power was dangerous and that ruling Egypt would not be easy. Many people think Cleopatra was very beautiful, but ancient sources say something different. Roman historians, who disliked her, described her as having a strong nose and sharp features. However, they also said she had a charming voice and an impressive personality. The famous writer Plutarch wrote that Cleopatra's beauty was not what made her attractive. It was her intelligence, wit, and charisma. She had a powerful presence and knew how to control a conversation. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BC, Cleopatra, at only 18 years old, became Queen of Egypt. However, she had to share the throne with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, as Egyptian law required a male co-ruler. They were also married, following the tradition of the Ptolemaic dynasty, where siblings often married to keep power in the family. Even though they ruled together, Cleopatra did not want to share power. She wanted to rule Egypt alone. This created a conflict between her and Ptolemy Xi's advisors, who wanted the young king to have more control. Eventually, they forced Cleopatra out of Alexandria, sending her into exile in Syria. But Cleopatra was not ready to give up. She gathered an army and looked for a powerful ally who could help her return to the throne. That ally would be Julius Caesar. Chapter 2. Becoming Queen of Egypt. After her father, Ptolemy XII, died in 51 BC, Cleopatra VII became the ruler of Egypt at the age of 18. However, she was not allowed to rule alone. According to Egyptian law, a queen had to co-rule with a male. Because of this, she was forced to share power with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. They were also married, following the tradition of the Ptolemaic dynasty, where royal siblings often married to keep power within the family. Even though they were supposed to rule together, Cleopatra wanted full control of Egypt. She was highly intelligent, ambitious, and determined to be the sole ruler. However, Ptolemy Xi's advisors, led by his chief minister, Pothinus, disagreed. They believed Cleopatra was becoming too powerful, so they started plotting against her. For the first few years of their rule, Cleopatra acted as the true ruler of Egypt. Coins from this period show her face alone, not her brother's, which proves that she wanted people to see her as the main leader. She also signed important documents without mentioning Ptolemy XIII, which made his supporters angry. By 49 BC, tension between Cleopatra and her brother's advisors grew stronger. Pothinus and other powerful officials convinced Ptolemy XIII that Cleopatra was dangerous and that she wanted to take all the power for herself. With their influence, Ptolemy Xi's supporters forced Cleopatra out of Alexandria and exiled her to Syria. Even though Cleopatra had lost her throne, she was not willing to give up. She began gathering an army in Syria, preparing to take back her kingdom. She knew she needed a strong ally to help her return to power. That ally came in the form of Julius Caesar, the leader of Rome. At the same time, Julius Caesar, the Roman general and statesman, arrived in Egypt in 48 BC. He had been chasing his enemy, Pompey the Great, who had fled to Egypt after losing a battle against Caesar. When Pompey arrived, Ptolemy XIII and his advisors killed him, hoping to impress Caesar. However, their plan backfired. Instead of being happy, Caesar was furious because Pompey was once his ally. Now, Caesar was in Alexandria, looking for justice, and Ptolemy XIII was in a difficult situation. Cleopatra saw this as her chance to regain power. She knew that if she could win Caesar's support, she could defeat her brother and take back her throne. But she also knew that she could not simply walk into Alexandria, as Ptolemy XII's guards were watching for her. Cleopatra needed a way to secretly meet Caesar without being caught. According to legend, she hid inside a rolled-up carpet, or possibly a linen sack, and was smuggled into the royal palace. When the carpet was unrolled, Cleopatra appeared before Caesar, completely surprising him. Caesar was impressed by her intelligence, charm, and courage. She spoke multiple languages, understood politics, and knew how to make alliances. Cleopatra and Caesar soon became lovers, and he decided to support her claim to the throne. This caused a civil war in Egypt. Ptolemy XIII and his supporters refused to give up power and started a battle against Cleopatra and Caesar's forces. The war lasted for several months. Eventually, Caesar's army defeated Ptolemy XI's forces, and Ptolemy tried to escape by crossing the Nile River. However, he drowned in the river and died. With her brother gone, Cleopatra officially became Queen of Egypt. However, Egyptian law still required her to have a male co-ruler. So, she married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, who was just 12 years old at the time. In reality, Cleopatra had all the power, and her younger brother was just a figurehead. By 47 BC, Cleopatra had completely regained her throne, and with Julius Caesar by her side, she was stronger than ever. She was now the most powerful woman in the ancient world. Chapter 3: The Julius Caesar Alliance. After Cleopatra regained her throne with Julius Caesar's support, their alliance became one of the most important in both Egyptian and Roman history. Their relationship was not just based on love but also on political power. Caesar was one of the most powerful men in Rome, and Cleopatra was the ruler of Egypt, one of the richest and most important countries in the ancient world. Together, they formed a strong partnership that changed the fate of both their nations. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar's relationship was complicated but deeply strategic. Caesar was already a widower, and Cleopatra was a widow as well. But when they met, their bond was immediate. Cleopatra was not only beautiful but also highly intelligent, a woman who knew how to use her charm and political skills to get what she wanted. Caesar, on the other hand, was charismatic, powerful, and admired across the Roman Empire. Their relationship was more than just an affair, it was a political alliance. Cleopatra wanted to secure her throne and make Egypt strong again. For Caesar, the alliance meant gaining influence in Egypt, securing Egypt's rich resources, and strengthening his position in Rome. He also wanted to help Cleopatra rule as the sole monarch of Egypt and push back any threats to her leadership. In 46 BC, Cleopatra made a bold decision to visit Rome. She traveled to the heart of the Roman Empire, where Caesar was now the dictator of Rome. Cleopatra's arrival in Rome was a grand spectacle, and she became the center of attention. Cleopatra was not just a queen, she was a symbol of Egypt's power and wealth. She was welcomed with great respect by the Roman elite, and her visit was seen as a political statement. Cleopatra and Caesar spent much of their time together in Rome, and their relationship became well known to the people. During her stay in Rome, Cleopatra was given a palace near the Tiber River. She and Caesar became an inseparable couple, and their bond seemed unbreakable. Cleopatra even had a son with Caesar, named Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. This was an important event because it symbolized Caesar's support for Cleopatra and his recognition of her as the rightful ruler of Egypt. In 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Ptolemy XV, better known as Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. The birth of Caesar was significant because it meant that Cleopatra's son could potentially claim Roman leadership. Caesar had no other legitimate male heirs, so the birth of Caesar gave Cleopatra's family a chance to have a Roman connection to the throne. Cleopatra saw Caesar as a symbol of her and Caesar's power and hoped that he could one day inherit both the throne of Egypt and the leadership of Rome. However, the child's future was uncertain, as Julius Caesar had many political enemies in Rome. His rivals, like Pompey's supporters, saw Caesar as a threat to their power. Cleopatra was determined to protect her son and ensure his future, but Caesar's assassination in 44 BC would change everything. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of Roman senators, including some of his closest allies. They feared his growing power and influence, and they wanted to restore the Roman Republic by killing him. Caesar's death left a huge power vacuum in Rome, and this had a major impact on Cleopatra. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra lost her key ally and lover. However, she quickly realized that she needed to continue her political fight to protect her throne and her son. She had to adapt to the changing political situation in Rome. Cleopatra saw that the power struggles in Rome were not over, and she knew that she had to stay involved in Roman politics if she wanted to protect Egypt. After Caesar's death, Cleopatra returned to Egypt, where she focused on strengthening her rule. She had to deal with challenges from rival Egyptians and foreign powers. The Roman civil war that followed Caesar's assassination created further challenges, but Cleopatra remained determined to protect her kingdom. During this time, Cleopatra also began to prepare for her next political move, and this time it would involve another Roman leader, Mark Antony. This would set the stage for another significant chapter in Cleopatra's life. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar was a classic example of how politics and personal alliances were intertwined in the ancient world. She used her intelligence and charm to win Caesar's support, and in return, Caesar helped her secure her throne and the future of Egypt. However, with Caesar's death, Cleopatra was forced to adapt her strategy. She did not give up. Instead, she focused on securing her son's future and finding new ways to maintain Egypt's power. Her ability to maneuver in the complex world of Roman politics helped her survive and remain a dominant force in Egypt. Chapter 4: Mark Antony, Passion, War, and a New Empire. After Julius Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra's political future became uncertain. However, her intelligence and ambition made her determined to stay in power. With Caesar gone, she needed another Roman ally to help her maintain control of Egypt and continue her ambitions. This ally came in the form of Mark Antony, one of the most powerful figures in Rome. In 41 BC, Cleopatra met Mark Antony, one of Caesar's leading generals, at a time when Rome was experiencing a period of turmoil and power struggles. After Caesar's death, Rome was divided between two men, Octavian, later Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, and Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general. They had different ideas on how Rome should be ruled, and this created a dangerous rivalry. Mark Antony was the most powerful man in the Roman East, which included Syria, Greece, and Egypt. In a strategic move, Antony decided to meet Cleopatra, who was ruling Egypt and was known for her political intelligence and charm. When Cleopatra met Antony, their relationship quickly became more than just a political alliance, it became a deep personal connection. Cleopatra and Mark Antony's relationship was full of passion and political calculation. Cleopatra, always strategic, saw in Antony not just an ally, but a man who could help her protect her throne and, perhaps, expand her power. For Antony, Cleopatra was the queen of a rich and powerful kingdom. He was also looking for support in his rivalry with Octavian and believed that Cleopatra could help him in this conflict. The love affair between Cleopatra and Mark Antony was more than just an emotional connection. It was a carefully crafted political partnership. In 40 BC, they had twins, a son named Alexander Helios and a daughter named Cleopatra Selene. A few years later, in 34 BC, they had another child, Ptolemy Philadelphus. The births of these children were politically significant, as they symbolized the creation of a powerful family that could challenge the Roman rulers. To cement their bond, Mark Antony gave Cleopatra significant territories in Syria and Asia Minor, lands that had once belonged to Roman allies. This act angered many Romans, including Octavian, who saw Antony's actions as a direct challenge to Rome's authority. In 34 BC, Antony and Cleopatra held a public ceremony in Alexandria, known as the Donations of Alexandria. During this event, they declared that Cleopatra's children, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, would be rulers of parts of the Eastern world. Cleopatra's son, Caesar Ion, was also acknowledged as the legitimate heir of Julius Caesar and was named King of Egypt. This event marked the height of Cleopatra and Antony's power. However, it also deepened the rift between Antony and Octavian. Octavian was furious, seeing this as a clear move by Antony to form a new empire with Cleopatra, one that would rival Rome. Octavian used the donations to further paint Antony as a man who was betraying Rome by putting the interests of Egypt above those of the Roman people. The growing tension between Antony and Octavian finally led to war. In 31 BC, the two armies met at the Battle of Actium, a naval battle in the Ionian Sea. Cleopatra and Antony's forces fought against Octavian's fleet in what would become one of the most famous battles in ancient history. Antony and Cleopatra's forces were strong, but they were outnumbered by Octavian's more experienced and better supplied fleet. During the battle, Cleopatra and Antony's fleet were defeated. It is said that, after seeing the battle turning against them, Cleopatra and her ships fled the battlefield, followed by Antony, who chased after her. The defeat was a major blow to their plans. After their defeat at Actium, Antony and Cleopatra fled to Alexandria. They both faced the consequences of their failure. Their power was shattered, and Octavian's forces began closing in on them. In 30 BC, Octavian's army entered Alexandria, and the once proud rulers of Egypt were forced to confront their inevitable fall. Mark Antony, believing that Cleopatra had been killed in the attack, took his own life by falling on his sword. When he discovered that Cleopatra was still alive, he was brought to her, but he died in her arms. His death marked the end of any hope of a joint empire between Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra, realizing that her dreams of power were over, decided to end her own life. According to legend, Cleopatra committed suicide by allowing a poisonous asp, snake, to bite her. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. With Cleopatra's death, Egypt became a Roman province. Octavian, who would later become the first Emperor Augustus, officially annexed Egypt into the Roman Empire. The once great kingdom of Egypt was now under Roman rule, and the Ptolemaic dynasty came to an end. Though their political dreams ended in failure, the love story of Cleopatra and Mark Antony continues to be one of the most famous and tragic in history. Cleopatra's political and romantic relationship with Antony shows how the intersection of love and power can shape the future of entire empires. Cleopatra is remembered not just for her beauty, but for her intelligence, courage, and ambition. She was a woman who used her charm and wit to secure power and protect her kingdom, but ultimately, her alliance with Mark Antony led to her downfall. Despite their defeat, Cleopatra and Antony's legacy still endures in popular culture, as symbols of romantic tragedy, political ambition, and the struggle for power. Chapter 5. The Battle of Actium and Cleopatra's Last Stand. The Battle of Actium is one of the most important events in history, marking the dramatic end of the political power of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The battle, fought on September 2, 31 BC, between the forces of Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, and the combined forces of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, would decide the future of both Rome and Egypt. The tension between Mark Antony and Octavian had been growing for years. After the death of Julius Caesar in 44 BC, the Roman world was divided between two powerful men: Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, and Mark Antony, his loyal general. Over the years, the conflict between the two men had become more intense, and both were eager to control the Roman Empire. By 34 BC, Antony had already made a public move to align himself with Cleopatra. He granted Cleopatra control of several territories and declared her children as heirs to parts of his empire. This not only angered many in Rome but also set the stage for a direct confrontation between Antony and Octavian. The tension reached its peak when Antony married Cleopatra, further infuriating Octavian, who used this as propaganda to accuse Antony of betraying Rome and placing Egypt above Rome. By 31 BC, Octavian had secured enough power in Rome to challenge Antony and Cleopatra. The two sides began preparing for a final showdown. Cleopatra, who had been in a political and romantic alliance with Antony, was eager to defend her throne in Egypt and her children's future. Antony and Cleopatra gathered a fleet of ships, consisting of approximately 500 ships and thousands of soldiers, to meet Octavian's forces. However, Octavian, who was more politically astute, had secured the loyalty of key military leaders and had a much more experienced and organized fleet. His fleet, commanded by Agrippa, consisted of around 400 ships. Agrippa's leadership would prove to be a crucial factor in the outcome of the battle. The battle took place near the Ionian Sea, off the coast of Greece, near the small promontory of Actium. Both sides anchored their fleets in preparation for the confrontation, but despite their large numbers, the two fleets faced a critical disadvantage: the narrow waters and the difficulty of maneuvering such large fleets. The battle began as the two fleets faced each other. Octavian's fleet, commanded by Agrippa, was well prepared for the challenge. Agrippa's strategy involved using his ships to outmaneuver the larger fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. The outcome of the battle largely relied on the naval tactics and leadership, and Agrippa's experienced command proved decisive. On the other hand, Mark Antony and Cleopatra's fleet were unable to match the disciplined tactics of Octavian's forces. Cleopatra's ship was the largest and most impressive vessel in the fleet, but it was also the least maneuverable. Initially, Antony's fleet put up a fight, but the situation grew worse as the battle wore on. At one point, it became clear that the battle was lost. The most dramatic moment came when Cleopatra and her ships fled the battlefield. Seeing the tide turning, Cleopatra ordered her ships to retreat, leaving Antony and his forces to face the Roman fleet alone. Antony, deeply in love with Cleopatra, followed her, chasing after her ships. The decision to abandon the battle was seen as a crucial mistake, and it ultimately led to their defeat. With Cleopatra and Antony's forces in retreat, Octavian emerged as the victor. The battle marked the end of any hope for Antony and Cleopatra's ambitions of ruling together. In the aftermath of the battle, Octavian's forces quickly gained control of the eastern Mediterranean. Antony, desperate, returned to Alexandria with Cleopatra. Meanwhile, Octavian began the process of consolidating his power, with the Roman Senate declaring him as the sole ruler of the Roman world. His victory in Actium left him in full control of the Roman Empire, and Egypt, once a powerful independent kingdom, would soon be annexed into the Roman world. After the defeat at Actium, Cleopatra and Antony faced certain defeat. They retreated to Alexandria, where they took refuge in the royal palace. However, their situation was hopeless. Octavian's forces advanced toward Alexandria, and their fate seemed sealed. In a last desperate attempt to avoid capture and humiliation, Antony committed suicide. In 30 BC, Mark Antony fell on his own sword, believing that Cleopatra had already been killed. But Cleopatra was still alive, and when Antony was brought to her, he died in her arms. Feeling that all was lost, Cleopatra also chose to end her life. The exact method of her suicide is unclear, but the most famous version of the story involves her allowing a poisonous snake, asp, to bite her. According to legend, Cleopatra's last words were a declaration of her love for Antony. She passed away soon after. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. With her passing, Egypt was officially absorbed into the Roman Empire, and Octavian, who would later take the title Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome. The Battle of Actium, and the events that followed, marked the end of Egypt's independence. Cleopatra, once a powerful ruler, was no longer able to maintain her kingdom's sovereignty. Egypt became a Roman province, and its rich culture and power were absorbed into the growing Roman Empire. For Cleopatra, it was a tragic end. Her dreams of reclaiming Egypt's power and establishing her family as rulers of Rome were crushed. Her legacy, however, continued. The story of her life, her romantic relationships, her political alliances, and her strategic genius has inspired countless books, plays, films, and other forms of art. Cleopatra is remembered as one of the most powerful and intelligent women in history, whose love and ambition shaped the course of empires. Chapter 6. Cleopatra's death, the end of an era. The death of Cleopatra VII, one of the most iconic and powerful figures in ancient history, marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt and the official fall of Egypt's independence. It was a tragic and dramatic end for a queen whose life had been filled with political ambition, intrigue, and romance. Cleopatra's death came after the defeat at the Battle of Actium and the subsequent loss of Egypt's power to Octavian, who would become the first emperor of Rome. After the Battle of Actium, which had ended in defeat for her and Mark Antony, Cleopatra's fate was sealed. The Roman forces, led by Octavian, were advancing on Alexandria, and Cleopatra knew that she and her lover were running out of options. Antony, who had already suffered a major defeat, was severely wounded in battle and returned to Egypt with the hope of regrouping. However, the loss at Actium made their situation increasingly desperate. Cleopatra and Antony took refuge in the royal palace in Alexandria. As Octavian's forces drew closer, Antony, deeply in love with Cleopatra, was determined to face whatever was coming with her. The couple sought to make their last stand together in the face of inevitable defeat. In 30 BC, the situation became dire for Cleopatra and Antony. Octavian's forces began closing in on Alexandria, and there was little hope of resisting them. In one final attempt to avoid capture and humiliation, Mark Antony took his own life. Believing that Cleopatra had already been killed, Antony stabbed himself with a sword. However, he was still alive when his attendants found him, and they carried him to Cleopatra's chambers. When Antony was brought before her, he died in her arms. This moment was deeply tragic for Cleopatra, as she had lost her beloved partner and, with him, her last hope of maintaining Egypt's independence. Antony's death marked the beginning of her own inevitable downfall. Cleopatra, devastated by the loss of Antony, was faced with the harsh reality of her defeat. With Octavian's forces approaching Alexandria, there was no way to escape the situation. She had already tried to negotiate with Octavian, but his terms were harsh, and Cleopatra understood that her future under Roman rule was grim. It is said that she had already begun making preparations for her final moments, as she knew that capture would mean the end of her reign and likely her life. In her final days, Cleopatra reportedly summoned her servants and trusted companions. She made them swear to remain loyal to her in death, showing the strength and determination she had always carried throughout her reign. There is no definitive evidence of the exact circumstances of her death, but various accounts suggest that she chose to end her life in a dignified way, refusing to be humiliated by Octavian. The exact cause of Cleopatra's death is still a subject of debate among historians, but the most popular version of the story involves the use of a poisonous asp, a type of snake. According to ancient accounts, Cleopatra allowed the asp to bite her, committing suicide in this manner. It is said that the bite of the asp, which was known for being highly venomous, would have caused a slow and painful death. Some historical sources suggest that Cleopatra may have died from a combination of the snakebite and a poisonous mixture that she used to ensure her death. Others believe that she may have taken poison and used the asp as part of her symbolic gesture of defiance against Rome. While the details of her death remain uncertain, one thing is clear: Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era for Egypt. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, and after her death, Egypt ceased to be an independent kingdom. Cleopatra's death was not just the end of her life, but also the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. The powerful kingdom of Egypt, once a symbol of wealth, culture, and influence, was now a province of the growing Roman Empire. Despite her tragic end, Cleopatra's legacy has lived on through the centuries. She was remembered not just for her beauty, but for her intelligence, political acumen, and the powerful alliances she forged with two of the most famous Roman leaders, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Her life has been the subject of countless works of art, literature, and film, from Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra to modern-day portrayals of her in movies and television. Her death also served as a turning point in history. With Cleopatra's passing, Egypt officially became part of the Roman Empire. Octavian, later known as Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome, and the course of Western civilization was irrevocably changed. The combination of Rome's military power and Egypt's wealth would help Rome rise to new heights, while Egypt lost its independence. Cleopatra's death symbolized the end of an era in both Egypt and the broader Mediterranean world. She had been a powerful figure, both a ruler and a lover, deeply involved in the politics of the ancient world. Her death marked the end of Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty, and her passing left an indelible mark on history. While she may have been defeated politically, Cleopatra remains one of the most enduring symbols of ancient power, beauty, and intellect. Her life, full of intrigue, ambition, and love, continues to captivate historians, writers, and filmmakers to this day. The end of Cleopatra's reign in Egypt signaled a new chapter in the history of the Mediterranean world, one that would forever be shaped by the growing power of Rome. Chapter 7. Cleopatra's Legacy and Hidden Truths. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, remains one of history's most enigmatic and fascinating figures. Her legacy is not simply confined to her dramatic life and tragic death, but it extends into the realms of politics, culture, and even the perception of women in power. As one of the most powerful women of her time, Cleopatra's life has been the subject of myths, interpretations, and even distortions over the centuries. However, there are many aspects of her legacy and life that remain hidden, misunderstood, or misrepresented. Cleopatra's political legacy. Cleopatra's political influence was immense, yet it is often overshadowed by her relationships with powerful men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. However, her reign was marked by a series of astute political maneuvers, and she was far more than just a queen with romantic entanglements. Cleopatra was an able and strategic ruler who aimed to restore Egypt's independence from the growing Roman Empire. After the death of her father, Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra fought for her throne against her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, who was supported by the Romans. She eventually regained her power and became the sole ruler of Egypt, demonstrating her remarkable ability to navigate complex political landscapes. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony were not simply romantic. They were calculated efforts to protect Egypt and strengthen its position. By having children with both men, Caesar Ion, the son of Julius Caesar, and the twins Alexander Aelios and Cleopatra Selene with Mark Antony, she sought to ensure Egypt's future security and maintain its power in a rapidly changing world. Although Egypt was eventually absorbed into the Roman Empire after her death, Cleopatra's actions prolonged its independence for several more decades than might have otherwise been possible. Cultural and intellectual legacy. Cleopatra was not only politically astute but also a highly educated and cultured woman. She was a lover of the arts, sciences, and philosophy. Unlike many other rulers of the time, Cleopatra was well versed in several languages, including Greek, Egyptian, Latin, and possibly others. This linguistic ability allowed her to engage deeply with scholars, diplomats, and leaders from different parts of the world. Cleopatra was a patron of learning and culture. She established herself as a supporter of the famous Library of Alexandria, one of the largest and most important libraries in the ancient world. During her reign, Alexandria continued to be a center of intellectual activity, attracting philosophers, scientists, and writers. The queen herself was highly regarded for her intelligence and had a deep understanding of political and military strategy. Her role as a cultural figure was symbolized by her association with the goddess Isis, whom she identified with in Egyptian iconography. Cleopatra portrayed herself as a divine figure, which helped to reinforce her legitimacy as a ruler in the eyes of the Egyptian people. The image of Cleopatra as a goddess queen contributed to her lasting legacy as a woman of extraordinary power and allure. Cleopatra's image in history and popular culture. Over time, Cleopatra's image has undergone many transformations. In the ancient world, she was both admired and criticized. Greek and Roman historians often depicted her as a seductress who used her beauty and charm to manipulate powerful men. However, this portrayal is simplistic and often overlooks her political intelligence and the strategic alliances she made to protect her kingdom. In modern times, Cleopatra has been the subject of numerous works of art, literature, and film. She is often depicted as the epitome of beauty, grace, and allure. However, this portrayal has sometimes led to a distortion of her true character and achievements. The most famous example is the 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, which focused more on Cleopatra's romantic relationships than on her accomplishments as a ruler. While Taylor's performance immortalized Cleopatra as a captivating figure, it also reinforced the idea that her power lay solely in her relationships with men. In recent years, however, Historians and scholars have worked to restore Cleopatra's image as a powerful, independent leader in her own right. They have emphasized her political skills, her deep connection with her people, and her ability to adapt to the ever-changing political environment of the Mediterranean world. Hidden truths. The real Cleopatra. While Cleopatra's life has been widely studied, there are still many hidden truths and aspects of her character that are not well known. For instance, Cleopatra was not the exotic, Egyptian beauty that popular culture often portrays her as. In fact, she was of Greek descent and belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had been ruling Egypt for several centuries. Her physical appearance remains a matter of speculation, as no contemporary portraits of her exist, and the surviving images of her, including coins and sculptures, may not fully capture her true likeness. Another hidden truth is that Cleopatra's relationships with Caesar and Antony were not purely about love and passion. These alliances were politically motivated, and Cleopatra used them to secure Egypt's independence. Her relationship with Julius Caesar allowed her to secure her position as queen, while her partnership with Mark Antony was a bold attempt to strengthen Egypt's power in the face of growing Roman influence. Cleopatra was also involved in several military campaigns during her reign. She played an important role in leading Egyptian forces in the struggle against the Romans, particularly during the conflicts with Octavian. However, her military ventures were ultimately unsuccessful, and her defeat at the Battle of Actium sealed her fate. The enduring mystery of Cleopatra. Despite her significant role in history, Cleopatra remains one of the most mysterious and misunderstood figures of the ancient world. She was a woman who defied the conventions of her time, using her intelligence, charm, and political savvy to maintain her kingdom's independence. Yet, her life and death have been overshadowed by myths and sensationalized portrayals that have often distorted the truth. Her untimely death, the dramatic end to her reign, and the fall of Egypt into Roman hands cemented her legacy in the annals of history. Cleopatra's death, however, did not erase her impact. She remains an enduring symbol of feminine power, leadership, and the complex intersection of love, politics, and war. Cleopatra's legacy, a timeless icon. Today, Cleopatra continues to be an icon, celebrated for her beauty, intelligence, and political skills. Her legacy is preserved not only in history books but also in popular culture, where she remains a subject of fascination. She represents a woman who fought to protect her people and her kingdom, even at the cost of her life. Cleopatra's true legacy, however, lies not just in the romanticized images of her as a seductress, but in the way she shaped the history of Egypt, the Mediterranean world, and beyond. Through her intelligence, diplomacy, and strategic alliances, Cleopatra proved that women, even in the ancient world, could wield immense power and influence. Her legacy continues to inspire leaders, thinkers, and individuals today, offering a model of strength, resilience, and the ability to shape the course of history. Cleopatra's hidden truths, her political mastery, and her complex character ensure that she will always be remembered as one of the most remarkable and fascinating women in history. Thanks for watching the video.